This was one of my earlier paintings in oils, and at this time I was using a method similar to what I was doing in acrylic and some of the same brushes. This is my main acrylic brush, and I used that of course for the details, and I was also using another brush that I had discovered that was just a little bit stiffer than the acrylic brushes I had been using, again a synthetic, but I liked the squarer shape because I could get it really thin and do all these little hairs, and of course just blend and move the paint around. I was working in thin layers pretty directly. When I got to the background, I switched to a larger bristle brush. By the time I did this painting, I had switched to the brushes I now use, starting out by scrubbing in the layers. As you see in the workshop videos that I do, I scrub in the main layers initially with a bristle brush, a FILBERT bristle brush. So that's what I would have used for this one, wiping out the lighter areas with a Q-tip. And then switching for the second layer to this soft synthetic brush, a flat that I use most commonly now. So this is used for most of the painting. Occasionally, if I'm doing something small, like the areas of the teeth, if it's too small to use my flat brush, I will use a round synthetic. But most of the time I still use the flat brush. And then of course when I get to the outer layers, again the wider bristle brush. Whereas with the first two paintings I was using my smoother linen canvas. For this one I used a slightly coarser canvas. This one is 6 inches by 8 inches, and the canvas has a little more of a tooth to it. And for that, I let the canvas texture work a little bit more into the style of the painting, and again I scrubbed it in, same as I had done before with the FILBERT bristle, and again I used this soft synthetic brush, but really going in just strokes in certain areas and letting the brush trail off. And I didn't use any other brushes but this one and the initial scrub in one. A very somewhat loose little painting that I decided to keep myself. So I've been showing you some of the brushes that I use when I paint in oil and some of the canvases and the resulting different techniques that show up as different styles in the painting. The first painting I showed you was a 16 by 20 of a German Shepherd dog. The second one was of my nephew, and it was a painting that is a little more like I usually do when I teach the workshops, and you've seen me do on the blog a lot of the different demonstrations. The third painting was a little bit looser on a coarser canvas, and also because it was a smaller painting, it looked quite a bit looser. Now this is the painting style that I'm currently doing the most of. I'm working on a gallery wrapped canvas, so this is a cotton canvas rather than a linen, and it's got a little more texture to it. And in order to scrub in my main layers, I do have to add a little bit of water to actually fill in the paint. So I start out using a bigger brush and often a little bit of water to get the areas covered. And I typically let it dry because it's a large area, so by the time I get through the whole painting, it's going to be dry anyway. So for the second layers, unless it's an area of detail where I resort to my little round synthetic or the brushes that I did use before, the softer flats, I have switched almost exclusively to another brush, and this is called a Rosemary, and they're expensive brushes, but the nature of the brush is that it's a synthetic, but it's a little bit stiffer than I have been using. So you can find substitutes that are a little bit stiffer, and the synthetic works well with my water-soluble oils. It also works with regular oils, and though it is pricey, these brushes really last. So I like the feel I'm getting with these brushes, and this size is a size I use really often. I'll use smaller sizes for certain little areas, but this size works really good for most things. And again, most of the time it's just stroking on the paint, back to the palette, stroke on the paint, and back to the palette. And I can get into most areas with a brush this size. So that's the various textures and styles I've been working in oils. And you can get a really different look depending on the surface you choose, depending on the brushes you choose, and the way you choose to apply your paint. Oil is really versatile that way.